Coming up next, the award-winning Below the Line with George Peroulas, 2013 winner of the AVA Award for Excellence in TV Production Editing.
Previously on Below the Line, part one of my interview with Scott Galloway. How has the cable TV business and the network business changed over the past couple of decades?
20 years ago, there were 15, 20 networks. Now there's 500, which is good and bad. Today, the way it works is you sell a show, and the network gets not only the show, they get everything. They get the raw footage. There's no residual after the fact. It's very difficult at that level when you're pitching big television networks to compete as an American, because the BBC, the CBC, and the Australian channels, they all have government subsidies and tax breaks. Network executives get pitched unsolicited shows, 100 to 200 ideas a week. Do a little sizzle reel, but don't make it more than 2 minutes long, and you have to find great characters.
How can the executives predict what's going to be a hit in a year or two? Is it a gamble?
Television network executives fail, movie studio executives fail. It's hard to know what'll work.
Part two of my interview with Scott Galloway continues now on Below the Line.
It's Below the Line with George Peroulas. On tonight's show,
Scott Galloway is here to talk about getting your show or film distributed. And I know there's many ways that can happen, whether you're doing a TV pitch or a film pitch. And is the best way to start off is with a really good script? Or how is the beginning of this done before you even shoot anything?
Film or TV or both?
Both.
Okay, television, I really do think you have to come up with an idea, but equally important, you have to find a network that it's well suited for. So by way of example, if you've got a show on dogs, well, you know Animal Planet's a network that you might want to pursue, but you probably don't want to pitch the Military Channel on an animal show. So truly, I always tell people, come up to me, they go, hey, I've got this great idea, and the first thing I ask them is, who's it for? One. Then secondly, why do you think you're the right person to produce it? Which I think plays a little bit to where we are. I think a lot of people in networks, and they've told me this in New York and Los Angeles, think that they're too bi-coastal in their storytelling. So not being in New York and LA, I think a lot of times offers and provides opportunities for storytelling that are here, indigenous to here. So by way of example, we pitched to Turner several years ago a haunted show, and they loved it because they knew we could shoot in Savannah, Georgia, or in Charleston, and they knew that there's kind of this interesting reverie and backstory to the South, to Dixie, if you will, and on funerals and on ghosts and ghost stories and a real reverence for storytelling. So I think in that instance, if you can find out ways to come up with ideas that play to who you are and where you are, then find a network that it's well suited for. That's the best way, I think, to get a show sold. As far as films go, my background's exclusively in documentary film. The films that we've distributed and we've had run in theaters have all been documentaries. So when it comes to narrative work and how to get those deals done, I'm probably not the best guy to answer. I would say on the documentary front, you want to try and get your film financed as much as possible, because it's difficult to get it back in the theaters or through Netflix or other deals that you'll do down the road. But the other thing that you want to try and figure out a way to do is try and get your film into film festivals, especially if you're not tied into a studio or a distributor initially. You want to try and get into the biggest festivals you can. I mean, now we live in a world where there's like 750 film festivals. I'm sure there's a film festival across the street. But you want to try and figure out a way to get into the big film festivals, because it's at the big film festivals that you meet not only agents, but representatives and people who are connected to studios.
Is having an agent the best way to meet with a TV network executive or a production company that's going to get to the next step for distribution in all the theaters?
If you can get the right agent, yes, without a doubt, it's a great thing to do. A lot of it depends on who can you get. If you want to try and make a film, I think go into the production companies themselves who've got a track record for the type of genre that you're doing works. As far as the film distribution deals that we've done, we were lucky enough to have our films play in some film festivals. The first film that we did was A Man Named Pearl, and our first representation group was really connected to Lionsgate, and so they really wanted to push our film through Lionsgate. And it didn't work for us because Lionsgate they moved glacially on our film. I think they thought it was good, but maybe not great. So we had to wait out a year with them as representation. But in that year, I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned is you want to try and find distributors who have an interest in what you've created. And so I found a distribution company that had just done a film called The Wild Parrots of Telegraph Hill. And I really liked that film. And I called the director, who was in San Francisco, and then she connected me to the distributor, who then asked me what film festivals we were going to be playing in. And we just happened to have one that was coming up that coincided where he was going to be, met him, and then we signed a deal with him, and then that helped usher out our film release. So I think, to your earlier question, agents can help a lot, and they're really skilled at that, but you want to make sure you get the right agent, and you also want to make sure that if you can't get representation, that you get your film out there either through film festivals or to production companies who make films similar to the film you've created.
And once you get a meeting and they like your story, your concept, or the script, how flexible must you be when they say, oh, we like this, but change this, we're going to add our writers? Because people who write are very protective of what they've written. So if it's that close of a deal, I guess you kind of have to let it go. What do you think?
It depends on who it is. Again, that's kind of more in the narrative world than I'm familiar with. In the case of our films, we made them. And then they were done. So then it was more a negotiation. What percentage of the cut do you get? What do we get? Will we do a deal with Netflix? Will we not? How is the iTunes deal going to go down? And that's where you need lawyers, and that's where you need people who kind of know what's in your best interest.
And when you're pitching these ideas and you think you've got that original creative idea, how can you protect yourself from them not taking your idea and doing it themselves in a year? Whether you're network, one of the big four, CBS, Fox, ABC, NBC, or a cable channel, because a lot of people have a lot of the same ideas, but they think theirs is original.
Right.
But how can you protect yourself? But it's tough.
Yeah, well, I can answer that question. You can't. You have to roll the dice to a certain extent and hope that they'll be honest with you. Most networks now will not take a pitch until you sign a release that essentially says, we'll look at your idea, we'll consider your idea, we might work with you, we might not, we might produce a show that's very similar to what you've just pitched us, we hope we won't, but until you sign that release, they won't look at your idea. In fact, if they don't give you the release, then they might not even consider you at all. So that's one of the challenges that you have to face. For the most part, I've never had that come back and bite us. It did bite us once, where we wanted to do a sports show in a network that will remain
Anonymous.
Anonymous, yes. Actually, to their credit, called us up and said, really like this idea, but we're going to do it internally. And so, at least, we got stabbed in the front rather than in the back. But that was a tough day. That was a tough call to get. So it has happened, but it doesn't happen very regularly.
And there's nothing you can do legally, I guess.
Nothing, no. Because that goes both ways. I used to work actually for Scripps, and so they had the Scripps networks. We had a group sue us, and I thought it was completely ridiculous. They had an idea that was it was like 2 sentences. They wanted to do a travel show instead of being on a week or two, just like on a long weekend. Well, we had already done a show called 3 Day Weekend, and they felt like that was some sort of infringement on a 2-sentence pitch. So I see where the networks are coming from, because intellectual property is so subjective, and a lot of these companies are owned by major corporations, so they have to safeguard themselves. And the truth of the matter is there's a lot of people out there who will send out very short little things just so that they can become litigious down the road. So I can see it from both sides.
Okay, so you get the meeting with the executives, and now it's time for the pitch. What is a pitch? How long should it be? And what should be included?
Okay. All good questions. What should be included in a pitch are 2 things. What's your show, and why is that network's viewers going to watch it? That's the first thing. Second thing is most pitch meetings are set up in 30-minute increments, so you get about 30 minutes. The next thing is you need to know that you're probably going to be in New York or Los Angeles, and so when you come from North Carolina, you're almost like a glorified field trip. These executives are like, oh wow, North Carolina, that's great. What's that like? So I always spend a little bit of time talking about Charlotte, In fact, two funny quick stories. One was this one lady started talking to me about how much she loved Charlotte. I thought it was great. She's like, I love that historic district right there on the water. And so as she keeps telling, I realize she doesn't, it's not, and so she had confused Charlotte with Charleston. South Carolina.
Yeah.
Or another person said, oh, I love Charlotte. Isn't UVA in Charlotte? I said, that's Charlottesville, Virginia. So anyway, so you're meeting with people who don't know necessarily North Carolina, but that's good. I mean, that's fun, and they're excited to see you and work with you, and they recognize too that, you're not necessarily in a union state, and you've got the ability to kind of have some costs that are maybe a little bit less, and so they want to work with you. But the biggest thing that you need to do is you need to have just a few ideas. I mean, I was in a meeting one time with a guy who I worked for a long time ago, and he had like 15 ideas. And I could tell that the programming executive was like, if you have 15 ideas, you haven't spent a lot of time on any of them. And I just kind of want to get through this list. So only going with 2 or 3 ideas. And again, play to your strengths. This is the idea. This is why your viewers are going to watch it. And this is why you need us to produce it. You know, this is on Carolina barbecue and we live in the Carolinas. Or this is on Michael Jordan and he's my neighbor, or whatever. So if you can come up with ways to do that, you'll have some success. But also know this. You're never going to walk out of a pitch meeting with a deal. There's going to be a follow-up, so make sure that you leave in a way that has some sort of follow-up mechanism to it.
So are there visuals or storyboards needed for the pitch meeting?
What we'll do is we'll create it like only a page or two. I mean, television executives are like any executive; they don't like to read a lot. I think if your pitch is much more than 2 pages, it's too much. I mean, I could never see a TV executive reading Tolstoy, because you got to move. What is it? And answer all the questions. Oh, and the other thing, and I think this is really important too, is just know that whoever you're pitching is predisposed to say no. They're going to say no because they're in the business of saying no. It's a buyer's market. You're the 3 to 3:30. There's a 3:30 to 4 after you. There's a 2:30 to 3 before you. They only have 2 slots, and they're going to say no. So any question they have that gives them an out, be ready to answer. Does this show have a host? Yes. Why? Who are you considering? All of the questions that they're going to ask you need to have an answer for, because that's the way the discussion goes.
So when they ask you who's your host, you tell them it's me, right?
George, yes. Well, your agent's very difficult to deal with, but if we can...
Don't I know it? Stay with us. We're back with Scott Galloway right after this. You're watching Below the Line. With us is Scott Galloway from Suzy Films. What are some things to avoid in a pitch meeting?
Nervousness. Truly, I mean, the first time I ever pitched on my own when we had our first company, I pitched A&E, which is in New York, and I went up there and I'd set up the meeting 2 months in advance, and we'd worked so hard for it. Went up there and I was so nervous, I was cottonmouth. In the middle, I mean, I could barely breathe. And so I said to the lady I was pitching, I need to go to the restroom. And so I left and went to the bathroom. I was like, oh my God. And then I went back and not surprisingly, I didn't sell her anything. But I think being confident helps. I think the biggest challenge anyone who doesn't have a lot of programming experience would have to address is, you don't have a lot of experience, so why do we want to work with you? And so trying to figure out ways to surround yourself with really talented people helps with that question. But I think, be yourself and really believe in why you're there. And ultimately, to be successful in selling, you have to think that it's a win-win. You've got a great idea and it's going to help the network. And that should come across.
And you're not going to get the yes automatically in the pitch meeting, but with meetings to follow, let's say you do. Walk me through the process of getting the yes to getting your production team going and then shooting it and then getting it on the air or getting it out there. What is the timetable and does it vary?
It totally varies. It depends on the variables in the equation. If you got a studio show, then you don't really need to worry about weather. Volume is important. If you have talent that's associated with a network, sometimes their schedules will dictate when you deliver. But usually, once you get a yes, then you talk to business affairs and they will go through a budget with you. And then you have to figure out exactly how much money you can get paid per episode. And they usually buy in 13s. So a network buys in 13s, you run it once and repeat it 3 times, and that's a year. That's kind of the model that they follow. But after you get that, then you're in pre-production for a while. Pre-production, and I'm sure anyone will tell you, is critically important to the process. We usually set aside a little bit more time for the pilot or the first couple of episodes because we know we're going to make mistakes and or we're not going to deliver what the network wants, so you got to try and figure that out. Post-production can be all over the place. A lot of the stuff we do that's documentary in the field stuff just requires a lot more editing because there's so many variables, so many unknowns. But as far as a rollout, usually we can do a 13-show series in about 6 to 9 months on average.
And is that based on already having treatments for 13 episodes or scripts ready?
Usually, yeah, good question. We usually don't have anything really in detail past a few episodes, but that's another thing. If you're going to sell a series, you kind of need to talk them through that, because the other thing that networks tend to do, and again this makes sense, is they want to limit the buy. So if you've got a show that you want to do on coffee mugs and you want to do 13 episodes and they're like, gosh, I don't know, we haven't worked with George, I don't know, do we want to do 13? Why don't we do 5 and then we'll run it every night at 9, or we'll do it as a stunt on the weekend. They'll want to try and make that initial buy shorter. Now as a production company you want more because then you can amortize your costs, but you have to have initially a conversation. You'll have a conversation on what's your 3rd episode and how is it different from your 7th, which is different from your 11th. But when you actually then go into production, you haven't really thought it out as much as you need to.
I'm sure you hear it a lot where people complain that there's no original ideas coming out of Hollywood, but I think there are. It's just that these original stories are expensive to make and it's a gamble. And with the recession recently and studios only feeling comfortable with what's been proven, I guess that's why there's a lot of remakes and then TV shows that become films. Is it because they have a built-in audience?
It could be. I mean, I think one of the things that I've seen in Hollywood is you have to studios are almost designing big blockbuster films because they know that they'll work. The comic Marvel whatever franchise that works. You get the tweens and teens and they come out and watch. But the smaller films, it does seem like it's maybe a little bit more difficult. I think there's a lot of great content being made right now, but by an HBO or a Showtime, and you have to find those pieces, or Sundance. You have to find those pieces. They aren't. I think back in the day, you either saw them, on a broadcast network every once in a while, or you saw them in the theaters. But they're out there. They're just harder to find because there's so many distribution outlets.
And distributing your TV show internationally, how does that work with sales and getting the word out there? And how is it split between, I guess, the creator or the writer or the production company and the anchor who's got it out there? Because it could be many people involved. So what's the big project in the process of getting the show seen worldwide?
Television networks, most television networks now, the bigger networks, have international distribution already built in. So they own the content, you provide them with a program, and then it's up to them to distribute it however they want to distribute it. With films, it is different. There are 2 very different distribution models outside of the studios. So you have domestic film distribution, and then you have international film distribution. And a lot of the international film distribution deals happen at MIPCOM, which is in France, and I believe it's in May every year. And what'll happen is you can get an agent in the States, and there's some great Films Transit's a great kind. Rocco Films is another great one, but they will then try and take it out, and then you sell to different countries, and essentially you license your film to countries. Like you can do a deal with the English 7, which are the 7 countries that speak English, or you can do deals in Asia, but they tend to be very territorial, and it's my understanding that that's a really difficult business, and it does pay to have an international distributor who knows the people who can make those decisions for you.
Very good. Coming up next, find out the truth on if your film will be discovered at film festivals. Does it work? Well, Scott here knows the answer. Stay with us. Short films and independent feature films are made throughout the world, and now there are more than 5,000 film festivals on the planet. Indie filmmakers hope the exposure at these festivals will get their film sold. Scott Galloway is here with Suzy Films. Now, Scott, does that happen, and how likely is it?
It does happen, not very likely. It usually happens at the really big film festivals, Sundance, in Toronto, and a lot of times it's almost kind of inside baseball. So you've got somebody who's got connections with Sony Pictures, and then they do a deal. The important thing about film festivals is you want to get in them, and it really would be great if you can win. And the award that I've been told that distributors are really interested in is Audience Choice Award. So essentially what that says is you've got a film out there and it connected with an audience. We've never done a distribution deal at a film festival. Well, that's not true, we did one, and it didn't work out for us. But what does work is if you can play in film festivals and you can win, best documentary or best film or best short or best Audience Choice Award, and then you use that as a way to send your film out to distributors who might then pick it up. That's the best way. It's a calling card. And film festivals are fun. I mean, I really enjoy going to them. You get to see your film and other films and meet filmmakers from all over the world, and they're great, and especially if you enjoy movies. So I think for us it's almost more the kick of going and meeting people who do what you do and sharing stories with them more than anything. But it is a great way, like I said, if you can have some success, to use that as a springboard to getting a distribution deal.
What is the best strategic plan to get your film into a really good film festival?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it's luck. I'll tell you, this is a true story too. So we entered the one film into a fairly prestigious film festival and we didn't get in. And you don't get into most of them, but this was one that I really wanted to get into. We didn't get in. Then I got a distributor to distribute our film, and he said, this is like 9 months later, he's like, hey, you really need to enter into this film festival that we didn't get into. And I said, well, just so you know, right before you picked me up, I tried and I didn't get in. And he said, well, try again and I'll put my name on it. So we tried again and we got in. Not only did we get in, our film closed the film festival. So it played in the main theater. Wow. But I say that only to say that a lot of times you're not going to get in because you don't know people who know people, because a lot of the people who screen the 750 films that come in are doing it as volunteers and they've got jobs, and so it can be challenging, but it's definitely worth it. You should try it, and there's a lot of different ways that you can find out when you can save money and you can find out what's coming up. There's a great site called Without a Box that we participate in, and they help you create your all the materials you need to submit, and you also get a discount on the film festival submission fee. It's almost like applying to a college.
Any advice on how your film can get noticed at a film festival? Even if it doesn't win, could there still be a deal out there?
I don't know. That's a good question. Winning helps. It's the truth. Winning helps. Getting reviews help. A lot of times if you play, like the Sarasota Film Festival is a great film festival in April down in Sarasota, Florida. Their newspaper movie critics will go out and review your films. We played down there. We didn't win, but we got a great review. And then I used that review as a springboard for a film once. So having local media review your film is good.
What do you have coming up next? I know you've done a lot of traveling over the past few weeks.
We're doing a couple different things. We're doing a short documentary right now, actually, on veterans, U.S. veterans, and homelessness. So we're excited about it only in that, I mean, it's a tragic situation, but it's an important message. We're doing a special for the Food Network and a special for the Cooking Channel, and we're doing some work for HGTV. And so it's a mixed bag. There's a documentary film that we're hoping to get financed that got fingers crossed that we hope happens. So a lot of different things are going on right now, which is exciting. And again, I think it's important, especially in this market, to stay diverse.
Well, very good. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming, and wish you all the best on your future projects.
Thanks for having me. It's been good spending time with you.
All right. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks again to my guest, Scott Galloway, and thank you for watching. Feel free to contact us with your questions, comments, or show ideas. The email address is belowtheline21@gmail.com, and join our fan page on Facebook. We'll see you next time.
For more information, comments, or questions about the show, email us at belowtheline21@gmail.com.